And we're back. In this segment of the show, I will be talking with Daddy about my life and his life. And I just wanted to add, talking about Grandmother Severe. I remember her in the house on East 72nd Street, 710 East 72nd Street. And she still sewed in those days, and she didn't have eyes good enough to thread the needle, so she would say to me, she would say, "Charles, let me borrow your eyes." And she would hold the needle, and she would hold the thread like this, and then I would take her hands and thread the needle for her.
I'll be darned.
And she would always say, "Charles, let me borrow your eyes."
She could also,
That's great.
she could also roll a knot with her fingers, just rolling it.
Ah, well that
What was that?
escaped me. She could roll a knot with her fingers.
Oh, yeah. I've often tried to do that, and I've never been able to.
I haven't either been able to.
And not that I've often tried to do it. I remember you were our snow shoveler,
Oh,
even over
yes.
there. 710 East 72nd, also in order, included the last three numbers of my payroll number with TWA. I used to tell everybody in the beginning that it was my age and my address was also my payroll number, 27710. Well, so much for that.
So much for that.
At 710 East 72nd, we had only one garage, so I couldn't put as much junk in it as I have in this house.
I remember that garage. There were flies in it during the summer, and I was terribly afraid. Whenever I went in there and stirred up the flies, they would make this buzzing noise that would just scare me to death. So I would rush out, and it was often hard because there were, many times there was something in the garage that I wanted to get. So
Oh.
it was one of these childhood sort of bravery things. If my desire to secure whatever it was in the object could overcome my fear of the flies, and I would usually spend a day or a day and a half, trying to screw up enough courage to rush into the garage and grab whatever it was I was looking for and rush out again.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
You were on a flight.
I was.
Yeah.
It seemed like I was gone an awful lot, but if you would work it out, I would imagine that I was at home and free to spend it with the family for twice as much time as I was gone. I know that when I finally flew the round the world trips, that we'd be gone for about 10 days and home for as much as 14 or 16 or maybe 18 days.
I remember that.
It was just like having a vacation every month.
Mm-hmm.
But we needed more money. They weren't paying us enough. American Airlines, $120,000 a year, average. It's awfully difficult to convince a layperson making $30,000 a year that a pilot should have a raise when he's already making 100 or 120. I think I never quite reached 100 before I retired, but certainly it was an adequate salary and one that we enjoyed having to spend with the children and to enjoy ourselves.
How long had you flown with TWA before you checked out as captain?
I think it was about 63. And if the post office at Drew Field, Florida, where I finished up my stint with the Air Force had not looked at my letter from TWA offering me the job, and he saw that the Fisher was spelled without a C and decided it wasn't my letter. But he cost me from a month and maybe 2 months with TWA, and that made a big difference in when you checked out. I would have checked out a month or 2 months earlier if this jerk hadn't. That's all the way. I could say something worse about him, but I know worse words, but I don't like to use them. Do you suffer much kind of gets at essentially the words you might use with reference to this guy. But he did give it to me after I went down and demanded it. And when I came back to your mother with it, why, she said, I told you to go down there last week, which was true. And maybe even 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. But she had a better grasp on seniority than I did, apparently.
Where did they interview you? Where did you do your interview?
We flew up to Chanute Field, I think,
Where was that?
in Illinois. There's, I forget the name of there are two there are two names for the town,
Champaign-Urbana.
Champaign-Urbana. I should have asked you in the first place. I might know that, yeah, it was Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. We lived in Champaign, your mother and I, in what amounted to an attic apartment. And we had a kitchenette and a bed and a bathroom, and that was about it.
What was the interview like? What did they ask you?
I don't remember, but anyway, he remarked about my voice and asked if people had trouble understanding me on the radio. And I told him no. As a matter of fact, people had told me I was quite easy to read on the radio, and they had. His name was Bert Cooper, and there was another guy, Jim something or other, that was personnel, and Bert was the flight department.
So that was what was involved in your being hired. You flew up there, and how long did you talk to this guy, Bert Cooper?
I must have talked to him about 20, 30 minutes or so. Mary Ellen?
Oh, you had your hand up at your face. Stephen signaled me and I signaled you.
Oh,
That's all.
to my face, okay.
Yeah, you were.
It seems awkward, maybe if it were here, but too late now.
Yeah.
So you talked to him for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Did he buy you lunch?
no, he didn't buy me lunch. I got free lunch from the Air Force. Why should he buy me a lunch?
Oh, were you still in the Air Force then?
Yeah,
But you'd been rotated home.
yeah, I'd
Out
come
of-
home by that time.
Yeah. So then what happened?
I was just trying to think, Champaign-Urbana. Yeah, from, we had R&R, rest and rehabilitation, when we first came back from Naples, Florida by boat, which was a heck of a long trip. I think it's 14 days. You're getting my left ear very good, aren't you? How's it look now?
Well, actually, I'm watching this camera.
Oh, is it showing me?
Yeah, it's showing both of you. They
Okay.
both are.
Tops of heads and all?
Yeah, all of you, basically.
Okay. Okay,
So then you checked out as captain in 1963,
about, yeah.
about.
I started to work for TWA on August the 6th, 1945, after that delay of almost 2 months, I think, at Drew Field in Florida. We were there during one of the mild hurricanes. In fact, we had shutters that we closed to keep out the wind. Actually, it wasn't very bad, but the major part of the hurricane went north or south of us. I don't remember which. That was, I think, the only time your mother had a ride on an Air Force airplane. They told us we could, when we came back to Drew Field, we could take our spouses or families for a ride. And I took your mother, and she was scared to death. And finally, after just a few minutes, we landed, and one of the tires blew out after landing.
Wow.
Was this a DC-3?
No, it was a BT-13. It's a Chance Vultee airplane. A very, very heavy, strong, single-engine, low-winged airplane. Needless to say, it was not pressurized, and it was noisy, and it rattled, and I don't know if I hit the brake too hard or what, or if I had nothing to do with the tire blowing out, but wasn't a bad landing. And they-
You walked away from it, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
good landing,
yeah.
Was it
That's
two-seater?
always. Please,
Two-seater?
two-seater, right,
Tandem or next?
Tandem.
Tandem.
yeah. So your mother, the only way she could communicate with me was to either use the Gospit. Anyway, it was a rubber tube about that big around with a mouthpiece on it that fed into your headset
Was she in the front or the back?
front. She had to lean back over her.
And it was an enclosed cockpit, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it was.
So then, do you remember when you started flying the Constellation?
Yeah, it's a picture there. I mean,
Uh,
a model
Would you
that
get the
Charles gave me.
Constellation behind you, Stephen, and hand it to us? We have a few props here. I think it's about time.
Exactly.
So you said you've got some props?
Yeah, I said we have some props.
I'm afraid that airplane is missing some props as well as
We'll see if,
other things.
if you hadn't have said anything, maybe no one would have
Missing a
noticed.
Rudder, too.
Oh yeah, we're missing a
I think it's up on top of
stabilizer.
it.
Needless to
Yes,
say,
sir.
Daddy's flew one's in a little better shape than this, but this is pretty much.
It's,
Do you remember when you started flying these?
Shortly after we got them, which was around 52 or 53, I think. Well, that wouldn't have been shortly after because they came along. They were already flying for the Air Force when I started with TWA. What's rattling there?
The clay that he used to weight the front has dried out and come loose.
Oh.
Well, what did you think about this plane when you first got into it?
Terrific airplane, but not quite as good as later models. And the second model was a 749, and it was heavy, and a little heavy on the controls too.
Hmm.
But it was relatively easy to fly. But we got 1011 eventually, which was had a Davis airfoil on it, like the B-24 bomber. It was a
Wait,
Just a clarification, was it 1049, wasn't it?
what did I say?
1011?
1049.
Lockheed?
Thank you. 1011 was a Lockheed 3-engine aircraft. Came along a good deal later.
well, that's interesting, we're talking about numbers. My telephone number right now is 1049.
I remember that.
Yeah, yeah. So we Fishers have, we have the military and commercial aviation in our blood.
Yes, we do. Those rounded things on the tips of the wings, that is a 1649.
1049?
1649.
1649?
Yeah, I think. Does it say so on the belly? Say what it is?
No?
Okay.
But it's, I can tell it's a later model because the earlier ones were shorter. And they seemed to be a little fatter, but maybe that was just because they were shorter.
The nose was blunter on the earlier ones.
Yeah, yeah. They look more like a shark somehow. Always reminds me of a
That's
shark.
a radar dome on the nose
Mm-hmm.
to look at the weather ahead of us. We actually could pick up aircraft with it too, but it wasn't designed for that, so we never ceased to look out the window.
Well, then you flew the Constellation for how long, do you remember?
No, I don't. Maybe later on in this series we'll figure out when it was.
Yeah. Well,
We used to, excuse me, go ahead.
I was just going to say the jets, the 707, went into operation in
52.
1958.
I thought 52.
Well, it might have been for the military, but Pan Am was the first carrier to use it commercially, and that was in 1958.
Okay. Well, I'll let you get away with that one for now.
There's a 707 back there. We could look at that one.
We used to fly this thing after we checked out on it, and tell each other that we would be happy to retire on it. It was such a great airplane to fly.
Which one?
This one, the
Yeah.
Constellation.
Yeah,
You mean fly it until you're retired, or
No.
retire on it?
yeah. We would be willing to do that rather than move up to a better airplane.
Oh, I see. I see.
Or move up looking for a better airplane.
So was there any major difference? You told me once you flew the Martin for many years.
Yeah,
Was
for
that
several years.
Was that a twin engine?
Yeah, and a prop.
Yeah, twin engine
And,
propeller.
It had piston airplanes, engines, instead of,
Turbines?
instead of turboprops or jet engines. Later on, it did the Corvair,
Convair?
No, that's a jet. There was a, maybe I should have looked up all these things before.
Oh,
There
that's
was a
all right.
Convair.
Convair
started this.
turboprop.
Yeah.
Convair?
Yeah, there was a Convair turboprop.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't fly that because TWA didn't have any. I think they did get some on lease or something from American, which flew them in the beginning.
And so then you went to the 707
No, the Convair next,
Convair.
Jet
Okay.
Convair. Is that
But
it?
you were checked out simultaneously in the 707 and the Convair, is that right?
Yeah.
So
mhm.
you flew them both at the same time.
Well, alternately, but at the same time period.
Yes,
I
I,
didn't fly them.
I think our audience understood what I meant.
Good I was, but not quite that,
Not that
not
good.
quite that good.
Yeah.
Me and Charlton Heston and Ben Hur.
Yeah. Straddling two chariots.
Amen.
All right. So how was it going from 4-engine propeller airplanes to 4-engine jet airplanes?
Easy.
Was it easy?
They used to tell us horror tales about cutting the power and not being able to rev up again on the Convair and the 707 particularly, but why would you cut the power when you knew you were in trouble if you did? You just eased the power back, and if it slowed down too much, you eased it up again, just like you did on the piston airplanes.
So it was easy, huh?
Yeah.
I still remember those days when you were training for the jets. I assume you first checked out on the Convair 880,
Yeah.
and it was here in Kansas City. And so during Lent, you would come to Mass with us. There was 8 o'clock Mass at Visitation. And you would come to Mass, but you'd have your uniform on because you were going right straight downtown.
Oh.
And I
And you
just,
guys had to walk home.
yeah, we walked home, but we did that anyway. But I remember feeling a great deal of pride. People would come up and ask me, why was my father dressed like that? And I'd say, well, because he flies airplanes for TWA and he's learning how to fly jets. And there would be a moment of stunned silence, and then they would, throw something at me or whatever.
Knock you down.
Knock me down.
Yeah.
You know what it was like. But I remember
Yeah.
that too. I thought that was pretty neat. I got a big kick out of that. But I also have to say this too, Daddy. I remember very carefully, very clearly, soon after you had gotten your license for jets, and we were standing over there in the kitchen, and you showed that to me. You said, "Look at this," and I took it in my hands and looked at it, and you said, I've never worked harder for anything in my life than I have for that piece of paper."
Well, I guess you're right.
I remember you sitting down in the dining room. We had in those days just the reel-to-reel tape recorder. We had this monstrosity that weighed almost as much as a piano, and you had taped probably both halves of the
Checklist.
checklist.
Yeah.
And so you had to learn it. Well, actually, no, you would read. You read the checklist, but you had to memorize the responses, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you had read the checklist into the tape recorder, I believe, and then you'd play it back, and you would say the responses.
Hmm.
So I remember that.
It's amazing the number of things that you guys do remember
Yeah,
that I had pretty much forgotten
yeah.
quick before. Show more leg than I want to. Me and Betty Grable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So how is it different flying the 707 from the Constellation?
Well, it was easier to get above the weather, and it was smoother in the jet than it was because we didn't have to, the up and down of the pistons that shook the Constellation pretty good.
Vibration,
Yeah.
I see.
Do you remember Ken Palmer? No, Bill would remember him. He was my co-pilot on a trip to New York on a DC-4 cargo airplane. And I was going to have 3 days in New York, so Bill and Mary Ellen and maybe you. I don't think you were going. We're going to go. Your mom and Mary Ellen and Bill. And they were going to ride on the passenger flight that paralleled my flight. But the time came to get on, and there were 3 of them and 2 seats. So at that point, I said, Bill, come with me. So we put Bill on the cargo flight, contrary to regulations. The statute of limitations is long gone by.
Long gone. Yeah,
Yeah, what are they gonna do, ground you?
Sorry.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you had him in the extra crew member seat in the cockpit?
ACM seat.
I'll bet-
Additional crew member.
I'll bet he got a kick out of that.
He was scared.
Was he?
They told him, Ken put him in the co-pilot seat, and I didn't say anything, obviously. But Ken was telling him how to fly, and he didn't want to do it because he knew he wasn't supposed to be there. But anyway, we got to New York, and we spent our 3 days there, and all 3 of them went back on the other.
You said that was Bill and me and Mother?
Bill and Mary Ellen,
Oh,
I think. Do you remember that, Mary Ellen?
Yes, I do. I remember a doorman at the hotel calling you captain or saying he knew you were a pilot because you could always tell.
Oh,
There was just something special about them, he said.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, tell me about your flight from Selfridge Field to, where did you fly in England?
I never did get that, did I?
No.
We went from Selfridge to across Canada and Lake Erie to Buffalo, New York.
Right.
Then from there, we went to Presque Isle, Maine. It was the first time I'd been in North Country at all.
What time of year was it?
It was the early fall, I guess. Yeah, it was. And after running a couple of resupply missions up to Goose Bay, Labrador, we finally flew up there with our ground support troops and spent several days there waiting for the weather to improve in Bluey West 1, Greenland, which was in a fjord, and off to the right after you got up into the fjord. And we landed uphill and taxied out and then taxied back down and parked in some of the areas they had cleared to make our parking places. And after about how many days, I have no recollection, we flew across from Bluey West 1 to, that was a code name that didn't mean much, I don't think. We flew to Reykjavik, Iceland, and landed there in about a 50-mile-an-hour crosswind. I was a co-pilot on those trips. my captain was a squadron commander. His name was Aubrey Huron.